Hi, I'm Ann Rieselbach, the League's Program Director. Welcome to the second of 3 nights of lectures by this year's Architectural League Prize winners. We hope that you can join us again next Wednesday, June 29th, to hear from 2 other winning firms. And if you haven't had the chance, please visit the remarkable online installation of all of the winners' work on the League's website. And in a few cases, you can visit installations on site in the winners' home cities. The installations form part of a set of online material about each winner, including firm profiles, an ongoing series of Instagram takeovers, interviews, and the videos from this lecture series. All of the online material was produced with the support of League staff members Rafi Lehman, Alicia Botero, Sarah Wessler, and Ann Carlisle. On behalf of the League, I'd like to thank the League Prize Committee, Luis Beltran de Rio Garcia, Tay Carpenter, and Gabrielle Coilar, all recent prize winners, for developing this year's competition theme, grounding, and inviting additional jury members, Christy Cornelius, Carla Dusaba, Lola Shepard, and Mabel O. Wilson, who along with the committee independently evaluated all of the competition submissions and then met as a group online, participating in an insightful and lengthy session to select 6 winners from a strong field of entrants. Britt Cobb and Michael Beirut of Pentagram once again designed compelling competition graphics and the downloadable installation poster, which is another way of getting the word out about the online and partially locally on-site installations. Please feel free to download this poster yourselves and paste it everywhere you possibly can think of. All of this is made possible through the enthusiastic corporate sponsorship provided by Tischler & Son, Delta Millworks, and Judlow. Additionally, League programs are made possible in part by public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council and the New York State Council on the Arts with the support of the Office of the Governor and the New York State Legislature. Support is also provided by the Next Generation Fund and Alumni Fund of the Architectural League's Emerging Voices and Architectural League Prize programs and the J. Clausen Mills Fund of the Architectural League. And of course, through the support of the League's members and friends. Although the 2022-2023 program season is drawing to a close, we hope that you will join us next week for the conclusion of this series, as well as an in-person or via Zoom for a current work lecture on Tuesday, the 28th, by Kashif Chowdhury of Urbana. Please check the League's website and sign up for our weekly newsletter to learn more about the League, including an extensive collection of online resources such as videos, essays documenting past programs and special projects, which should carry you through the summer until we start with our live programming again in the fall. League Prize Committee member Luis Beltran de Rio Garcia will introduce tonight's speakers. Beltran, who is a co-founder of the Mexico City-based firm Vertical and teaches at the Universidad Iberoamericana, will now introduce the speakers, and after their presentations, he'll join them in conversation and forward questions from the audience, which you can please pose in the Q&A section. Also, towards the end of the lecture, information about CEUs will be posted in the chat section. So welcome.
Thank you very much, and welcome everyone. Good evening. For this second night of lectures for the 2022 Architectural League Prize. As Anne said, my name is Luis Beltran del Rio, and I will give you a brief introduction about grounding and the winners. Together with Tay Carpenter and Gabrielle Cuellar, we formulated the basis of grounding, probably as a response to this global chimera, where particular languages feel to be left behind. We raised this question: how do young architects tether their work and practices to the ground upon which they design? Playing also with the possibility of ungrounded solutions, deeply rooted proposals, or as it happens with one of the studios tonight, literally working with ground. Tonight, I feel honored to introduce 2 of the 2022 grounding competition winners. On this second night of lectures, we are welcoming Dept, a landscape studio based in Houston, Texas, led by Isaac Stein and Maggie Tsang. Landscape architects and professors at Rice University, as defined by them, allergic to uncontextual solutions. A studio that literally works with ground. Their work ranges from scales and responds to real problems such as climate change and human-made disasters. Their fresh responses as designers also question the manner in which we're used to relate as inhabitants with nature in urban and rural landscapes, always challenging the status quo. And this can go from a prayer lawn garden to the way humans inhabit flood-prone areas. A conscious studio that understands the power of well-taught landscaping that probably gets far away from aesthetic discussions. Tonight also, for the second round, we have To, a Mexico City-based firm led by Jose Amozurrutia and Carlos Facio, and currently integrated by a group of designers, Úrsula Rebollar, Fernando Venado, Lisette Rios, and Mara Aguilar, their team. Their creative work, amazingly poetic, yet furthermore, their capacity of taking action into their concepts is quite impressive. They seem to understand the value of teamwork, but even more, are always eager to learn from contexts in which they have the fortune to work in, humbly reinterpreting vernacular labor methodologies and patiently observing landscapes. Also, with a broad range of scales, from ephemeral architecture interventions to inhabited residential projects, and lately as part of Colectivo 733, where they have developed impressive series of public buildings and spaces that concentrate in very smart structural solutions. Their work complicated to describe and yet very clear in each response to the context they have to work in. This, the capacity to observe an increasingly unusual quality in these liquid times. Please welcome Department and then Tom.
All right, hello everyone. My name is Maggie Tsang.
And I'm Isaac, nice to meet you, Isaac Stein.
First off, we just wanted to say thank you so much to the ARC League for all the work and effort that you've put into organizing the programming for the League Prize. It's really amazing. Everything that you've put together, including the exhibitions, the interviews, scheduling, etc. It's been really a pleasure to work with you. And we also just wanted to mention how honored we are to be part of this cohort of winners this year. It's really an incredible group of young designers and practitioners. And we're really grateful for the opportunity to share a little bit about our practice and some of the projects that we've taken on recently. First, we just wanted to describe our practice, where we are located, what kinds of projects we're working on. So Department is a landscape architecture and urban design studio based in Houston. In our practice, we focus on designing for the public and environment. Our work ranges in scale from designing small gardens to designing cities and systems. Through our work, we mediate between the social and the ecological. And in particular, we're interested in thinking critically about the city and nature, the interdependence between human and non-human life, as well as the way that species adapt to environmental change over time, and the role of designers as stewards and agents of that change.
So as landscape architects and urban designers, we responded to the theme of grounding put forth by the ARC League in quite a literal sense. So the lecture tonight is titled Pile, a Hole, and Other Grounds. For us, the ground is a physical and material reality. In this preoccupation, we, as mentioned previously, are allergic to utopian and escapist visions that are placeless and without context. Instead, we ground our projects in particular communities and environments. We sample soils, we observe and document site conditions, both past and present. We work with local nurseries, growers, and suppliers, and we collaborate with neighbors, workers, and artisans.
While our projects are rooted in specific places and regions, that doesn't mean that they're not also situated within a broader discourse around climate risk and rapidly transforming urban landscapes. Through building and research, we ask, how can we re-envision infrastructure, for example, at the scale of a neighborhood that provides multiple benefits? And what is our responsibility for the near and long-term care of our environment? These questions, while embedded in place, translate across geographies and ultimately reveal new potentials for our field and for our practice. So today we're going to present 4 projects and also briefly introduce our online exhibition for the Arc League Prize. This first project is called Pine in the Sand. It's a living installation located at the Wallach Garden in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Through this installation, we were interested in exploring how people would interact with and shape a landscape over time, and calling attention to the labor of maintenance and care, as well as the environmental processes of degradation, erosion, and change.
Like the title, the physical contents of this installation are quite simple. A pitch pine is planted atop a 12-foot mound of sand, and concrete jersey barriers partially contain this mound in a U-shaped wall. There are also recycled granite benches opposite the mound for visitors to rest and reflect. Though simple on the outside, the installation depends on what cannot be easily seen. From the calibrated soil mixes that balance nutrient content of the tree and structural stability of the pile, to a locally sourced pitch pine that was extracted from the ground through a process called air spading to preserve the most roots possible, to testing and modeling the exact extent of erosion given different sand and compost combinations. Over time, rain, wind, snow alter the appearance of the tree and the mound. Winter turns the pile into a small snow cap, and the color of the sand changes depending on how recently it has rained. Even small mammals have moved in. The installation invites visitors to interact using brooms, brakes, or whatever they may please. They are simply asked to please take care. Visitors engage in a variety of actions, relationships, and etiquettes that bring the pile to life. From gently raking and upkeep, to rambunctious running and playing, to writing fleeting messages, and to quiet reflection. The slide deliberately, the deliberately mundane elements of the installation, a tree, some sand, and jersey barriers come together to create a space that is transformed by the social and cultural dimensions of maintenance, care, and upkeep. The pine in the sand becomes a background to everyday life. With time, visitors come to see the installation as a barometer for change, registering short-term changes in weather, as well as slower changes in seasons. But more importantly, with patience and steady observation, visitors see the installation as a monument to impermanence, a small pile that manifests the ways in which we contribute to the degradation and care of our environment.
The Good Neighbor Stormwater Park is a half-acre community park in the city of North Miami that transforms a flood-prone vacant property into a stormwater infrastructure landscape. The project was designed and built as part of the Van Allen Institute's broader initiative that was called Keeping Current. The intent of the project was to reimagine the use of the city's growing number of so-called repetitive lost properties, or properties that are very prone to flooding. The driving concept of our proposal was to create a stormwater retention basin that would both prevent flooding for the surrounding neighbors, as well as to provide a community open space. The project is situated within a broader context and landscape of water management and sea level rise in South Florida. Since the 19th century, water in this region has been radically manipulated to make way for development as well as for land speculation. Instead of draining naturally southwards through the Everglades and natural drainage channels called sloughs, as you can see in the image on the left, water is instead highly regulated and controlled through a system of canals, pumps, reservoirs, and floodgates, as you can see on the map of the South Florida Water Management District on the right. Literally on top of that hydrological system, the continuous expansion of impervious surfaces such as roads, parking lots, and building roofs limit stormwater infiltration. And finally, because of the limestone geology of the South Florida region, sea level rise actually elevates the groundwater levels across the area and really makes flooding worse in low-lying spaces and renders infrastructure basically outdated. The location of flood-prone properties in North Miami, however, are not happenstance. Here's a satellite image of the North Miami, or in the greater Miami region, where you can see the location of our project site. And here's a 19th century survey of the exact same extent that shows the location of the project in the middle of a historic waterway called the Arch Creek. So in fact, before the Good Neighbor Stormwater Park was built, there used to be a house on the vacant lot. It was built in the 70s, and the house flooded so frequently that eventually the city offered to buy out the owner. When the owner accepted the offer, the city demolished the house and the lot lay vacant for approximately 2 decades.
A simple excavation on the site, which lies several miles west of Biscayne Bay and the Atlantic Ocean, reveals that the water table is only inches below grade, even on dry days. Communicating the history that Maggie alluded to of the site and its present day impacts, as saw in the whole, were principles that we baked into the community engagement and into the design of the park itself. The park is a visual marker of the former Arch Creek. The central retention basin increases the stormwater storage capacity by 4 times, but most importantly, it functions as a legible measure of the water table in the neighborhood. On dry days, the water level is relatively low, while during the wet season, and especially after rainstorms, the water level is high. A large blue stormwater pipe conveys excess water from the surrounding bioswale into the basin. The plant communities that we planted at the park also register the elevation changes across the site. From the upland forest in the southeast corner, falling all the way down to the southwest corner with the slough and the central stormwater pipe. In addition, there's interpretive signage about each of these plant communities, neighborhood flood hazards and risks, and the history of the site, providing context and information about the park and its function in the neighborhood. What makes the Good Neighbor Stormwater Park unique is that it provides multiple benefits in a small footprint. It reduces local flooding, it restores habitats and strengthens ecosystems. And finally, it provides a community open space that engages neighbors and residents on a flood risk. The park also serves as a model that can be adapted and replicated for future repetitive loss properties in the vulnerable region of South Florida, which we detailed in the overall vision plan and roadmap for the city of North Miami. In this way, the park offers an alternative form of stormwater infrastructure. Unlike other retention ponds or stormwater pipes, which are either buried or hidden from sight, the Good Neighbor Stormwater Park is a legible landscape for flooding and advocates for small-scale, community-oriented approach to stormwater and climate adaptation.
The court is a landscape and courtyard for a small hotel in North Florida that we recently completed. In this project, one of our goals was to transform a heavily compacted parking lot into a coastal scrub garden. In doing so, we worked to persuade our clients to reimagine the relationship between public and private spaces within the hotel and to push their boundaries of typical landscape and maintenance practices. In this project, we were interested in recreating the region's endemic landscape while also accommodating the programmatic needs of the hotel. Last week, actually, there was a discussion among the panelists about the relationship between the designer, the architect, and designer or architect and the client. And in this project, in our practice, we have a lot of typical sort of developer, commercial, and institutional clients. But in that work, we are always collaborating with them as well as contractors and others to really demonstrate how our work, in this case, landscape, is not the mere dressing on top of the ground, but is really a performative, infrastructural, and culturally significant aspect of the project. So functionally speaking, the client wanted to separate the central courtyard from the private units of the hotel, and they initially suggested that we build a fence or a physical partition. For us, rather than creating a sharp division between public and private, we suggested we proposed a subtle topography and a strategic planting that would provide a more fluid threshold and a lush garden setting for the courtyard.
So this topography that Maggie referenced is specifically modeled after the sand dunes that are just 500 feet south on the Gulf of Mexico from this site, and are composed in such a way that when you're sitting inside the room or laying on the bed, you feel immersed in a subtropical scrub forest, shielded by the palmettos and the leaves of the live oaks. But once you stand up and look out the window and peer out, you actually get a glimpse just over the palmettos into the central courtyard. In order to execute this concept, we work with a community of collaborators, from suppliers and installers to groundskeepers and artisans. With regional tree farms, we work to source wild-grown trees or trees that were otherwise undesirable, either because they were bent or curved or multi-stemmed. We worked with a local concrete artisan to refine and recreate a tabby concrete mixing method using shells and lime that you see on the right. And finally, we conducted on-site workshops with the client's landscape maintenance team and assembled a maintenance guide that established seasonal and long-term pruning and upkeep guidelines for the groundskeepers to work with as the landscape matures, evolves, and grows into its form over time. Ultimately, the court is an example of a project where we tried to push the boundaries of our clients' initial expectations and programming needs. In doing so, we are aiming to help our clients understand the potential of landscape to create a sense of place and cultural identity, and to also, through collaborations, develop new methods of construction and making within a local economy.
This last project is an in-progress installation called Prairie Plots that critiques the classic American lawn and explores lawn alternatives. With literal roots in English landscape design and garden cities, the lawn is a symbol of our insatiable desire to control nature. Lawn care, however, has damaging effects, from water-intensive irrigation systems to harmful pesticides to the noxious emissions that lawnmowers and other lawn care tools create. As a response to this context, and focusing on Houston's historic ecology specifically, Prairie Plots transforms a portion of Rice University's extensive maintained lawn into a vibrant coastal prairie.
So this ongoing installation is tailored around the tools that Rice Grounds already uses, and that is specifically a 60-inch zero-turn mower. The plan is based on a simple grid of planting beds that are shaped by said mower. And we are working with the Rice groundskeeping team to develop an alternative mowing schedule, a reduced alternative mowing schedule, I might add, that reduces both emissions and labor. The resulting landscape is a prairie garden that allows visitors to envision an alternative to the ubiquitous and homogeneous green lawn. Prairie Plots, in its essence, is a performative landscape that improves soil health and groundwater infiltration. The Coastal Prairie Conservancy, a regional nonprofit in Houston, estimates that 1 acre of coastal prairie, which is with its extensive root system, can store up to 400,000 gallons of water. This would significantly mitigate urban flooding, which, as you may know, is a regular nuisance in Houston. So while the installation at Rice is quite small, the potential territory for change is vast. As a living and growing installation, Prairie Plots presents an alternative for the city's sprawling landscape of suburban lawns.
And finally, before we wrap up, we wanted to build off of our Prairie Plots project for this next project called Remnant Nursery, which is our installation for the Arc League Prize. We worked with photographer Jake Eshelman to document the process. And this project really proposes a model of collectivity and exchange in the form of a temporary nursery. In the Houston metropolitan area, rare vestiges, as you saw before in the previous project, rare vestiges of the region's once vast Gulf Coast prairie remain. While protecting and conserving these landscapes is important and critical, both to conservationists and preservationists, Remnant Nursery addresses instead the reality of rapid urbanization and proposes a messier way of understanding urban ecology. Through the installation, we rescued plants from a threatened prairie on the edge of the city that was slated for development into a gas station and parking lot, and instead distributed them to Houston's residents. The Remnant Nursery invited community members to facilitate in a process of plant migration, where they can extend the life of these unique species within their own spaces, either in their gardens, in right-of-ways, or in other urban landscapes. So we'll leave it there with that, but you can check the full installation, check out the full installation on the Arc League website. And so just to wrap up, again, we wanted to say thank you to the ARC League for the opportunity to present some of these projects and our practice. And we hope that we've been able to give you a little bit of insight, and we look forward to the questions and the discussion.
Okay, we'll pass it on to the next presentation now.
Buena tarde. Good evening. It is a great pleasure to be here. We're really grateful with the Architectural League. Thank you, Anne, and of course to the entire team and jury involved. This award is an honor and an incredible opportunity to share this dialogue forum with you all. So this will be a short 20-minute lecture. So we've selected just a few projects to open up the conversation. More than talking about the specific architectural targets, we want to focus on driving ideas and some questions we ask ourselves on a daily basis. For example, what good things can we do with the little time we have? Or where should we point our efforts to build knowledge, growth? And we have sometimes found that the answers to that question, to these questions, have nothing to do with adding, but with reformulating, correcting, or even subtracting for things to happen.
So Carlos and I started our practice in 2015, but we met since we were teenagers, and we had a very strong friendship and a common interest and quest for discovery through arts and music. We had a number of music bands, and also through sports and the love for artistic expressions in general. So we have a strong belief in teamwork. This is our current team, and we believe that all architectural projects actually depend on horizontal collaboration. We have a strong respect for and admiration for the teams we have the chance to work with, and we're also both a design and building based practice, because we strongly believe in one-to-one dialogue with the makers of architecture, with those who use their hands and abilities and talent to transform the shape of what surrounds us, from masonry workers, carpenters, iron workers, everyone that is involved in the process of turning ideas into built environment. And our belief in collaboration has led us to be part of this great team we're working on with right now nowadays with Colectivo C733. We have a communion, a society of 4 offices, and together we're working for public space in Mexico. So today we're going to talk about some of our projects. This is our office. You are all invited to come and visit us in Coyoacán, in the south of Mexico City. Our office has turned into a cultural space where we have partners with great friends to make music events, cultural events, and all kinds of spontaneous ideas that come up with friends and colleagues can happen here. So our reflection today has to do with where we are right now. And we believe that humanity is facing strong crisis, and our city, Mexico City, is actually growing in a very frightening pace. This is a picture of Mexico City today, both by Santiago Arau. They are taken from Xochimilco and from the center of town, but Xochimilco is in the risk of turning a concrete area too. So we believe always this tension between the built and the unbuilt is a part of our everyday reflection in architecture, and we will see that through the following examples that we will show. So as Carlos says, more than showing architectural shapes or forms or projects, we're going to talk about what's behind them, which is environmental, social, cultural, political, and economical threats or themes that are behind these projects.
Okay, so this is Palimpsesto. It was the winning proposal of a contest to make a temporary outdoor pavilion that would last 5 years for the Tamayo Museum of Contemporary Art. Okay, a palimpsest is a manuscript in which the previous text was erased to rewrite a new one. Here you can see the famous palimpsest of Archimedes. And the paradox is that we generally know these texts thanks to the act of erasing them. So Mexico City, Tenochtitlan, 500 years ago was a large system of lakes, islands, and stone paths crossing the waters. The city we came from after centuries of ecocide preserves the traces of the ancient city. So this is like a trace. You can see, like both cities in one. We truly believe that the solution to the current environmental and social crisis has to come from the core, from the inside. Of course, fleeing elsewhere not only does not solve the problem, but perhaps increases it. So this is Tamayo Museum. It's an emblematic work, an incredible piece by Abraham Sabludowski and Teodoro González de León. Here in red, you can see the original exteriors. And when they invited us for the contest, this was the state of the floors. And they were doing work to remake them. So as the budget was very, very small, like $5,000, we thought that a strategy could be to float the original floor, like to convert the memory into a vegetal pergola and paying only for labor. So this is a sketch made by Hugo Sanchez, a friend of ours and a great landscape designer. And in these years, the idea was like the plants could be a testimony to the passage of time. And the work started. And we slides the rubble, turning into slabs. This piece of stone that become like tiles in a pergola. And some parts became planters for soil and vegetation. And here you can see the original marble stones and a material that was meant to be rubbish in some dump, converted it into a temporary testimony of the museum's memory. In the end, we really hope that they feel pity for the plants and never move the pavilion. Fingers crossed.
So Kitara, Tamayo Pavilion was a temporary response on how to recycle old concrete floors and turn them into a pergola. For this project, Kitara Music Kiosk, we recycled donations from the community to build a music kiosk, a music school by Kitara Foundation, a great foundation of guitar and music founded in the United States, in Boston. So this project is very meaningful for us because it connects us with people and social instances from different places. So to delve further into this reflection about the crisis of Mexico City, as you can see, the green areas of the city are disappearing around the city, and as we have to turn inwards. So how can we recycle our own architecture? So this plot is in Iztapalapa, which was an area of town that received a lot of the rubble from the 1985 earthquake. So from that rubble, many parts of Iztapalapa were not proper for building houses. But eventually the community organized itself to regulate the land and improve the quality of the soil in order to build. So this is Iztapalapa, and as you can see, our site is in between two important mountains, Jaltepec volcano and Montaña Alvarado. But sometimes when you're in the city, you lose the references of the mountains because of the construction is getting high. So here it was a non-governmental organization that organized people to improve the quality of the soil and regulate the land. And that organization is called Frente Popular Francisco Villa. And it was them who actually donated to Kitara Foundation a piece of land for the music school. Since this part of town has very high levels of violence and also great social issues as water scarcity, it was important to create a project that could promote new social life. So together with our friends from Kitara Project, we designed a project for the community and with the community. This was the plot they gave us for the project. It's a 20 by 20 feet, which in meters, it's only like 7 by 7 meters. So it's very small, and it's next to the library and the cultural hall of the community. One of the first things we made was a workshop with guitar students, where we asked them how would their ideal music school would be. So some of them were visionary and proposed 2-story school. Some of them proposed a garden. Some of them proposed very functional qualities, like to having a storing room and hanging walls and a choir space. So of course we listened to these ideas and poured them in the project. And we started to think and about how this building should behave. And we thought it had to be an instrument itself, like a musical instrument that emanates sounds outward, like this Renaissance drawing. We also thought that the building had to have an acoustic quality that would balance between the reverberation of sound, but also the absorption of sound with the geometry and the materials. And then we thought of a historical reference here in Mexico, which are the open-air chapels, which in the 16th century were built so that the religious ceremonies could happen outdoors. So the structure, the built structure, would only be a cover for the religious ceremony, but all the people would gather outside because of the climate and all the traditions, many events can happen outside. So we thought the project had to live towards the streets. So these are some of the sketches about not losing the geographical references and about how to make two classrooms, one upstairs with the views and with a isoptic quality for the musician, and one downstairs so that the classroom would open to the street. Later on, we further investigated about geometry and about how a vault could actually help the sound to keep inside. And we made a research about the materials. The plan is very simple. It's just a classroom and a storing room with a bathroom and a more private and safe box, like a safe space. These are our paper models. All this project is actually built based on donations coming from the United States and Mexico and from many people. It's a communal effort. So the spirit of the project is very simple. Also, the material that the walls are built with were donated by the community. Some of the material was donated. Some of them was recycled. We were at the time working at a house, so remodeling a house in the south of the city. So some of the material of that house we took here, And we started to test how to make this texture of the walls and to reinterpret the idea of a wall made of recycled material. Also with the wood, we used recycled Simbra framework for the construction. The same wood we used for making the vault, it was made for making the stand for the upper stair classroom. These are images taken recently, only 3 months ago. Right now we're finishing the kiosk, the musical kiosk. So more than an enclosed school, it's a public space. So we had a symbolic opening ceremony in March, and we already are seeing how the space is being used. We're very happy with the life it's acquiring on its own.
Hey, so now we will talk about the House of Music in Nakahuka. This is a project we did with our Colectivo C733. Nakahuka is a town in the state of Tabasco, in the southeast of our country. And here you can see that in the beginning, the construction had clay tiles and porches, which work very, very well for the climate of the region. This is like the whole view of the town. And the project was part of one of the federal government's urban improvement programs. We collaborated with two other studios, MMX, who made the plaza, and Enrique Lastra, who made the market. And nearby is Comalcalco, one of the few archaeological sites with pyramids made of brick, a material used for centuries. And we always start from seeing this kind of reference, because architecture is never a blank canvas. And on the contrary, it is sometimes a very colorful one. Most of the population of Nakahuka are Mayans, Chontal Mayans. The Mayans didn't disappear. Actually, they do great parties. They make like these carnival parties, and they had a lot of tradition in music and festivities. And this was already a community center and a school of music, but needed some improvements. And also had a wall to hide the stream, which the whole town uses to throw the drainage waters and as a garbage dump. So it seems to us that the best thing was to tear down that wall, and that the new School of Music and the whole building turned to the river. And well, for us, this was like the most important thing. We designed this water system, treatment system. In addition to rainwater harvesting, using the roofs, we like the waste water from the toilets goes through to this treatment system that ends up in a series of wetlands through clean water into the stream. So we are very happy, because this is like the very first building in town to do that. And yeah, we hope that since it's a public meeting point, it will serve as an example for future generations. We also use coconut palm wood, very abundant, and it's a renewable resource. It's very cheap and works well with the climate, provides warmth and freshness. And here you can see that we instead of glass, we use mesh and celosias, this wall with holes, so that the wind could flow and avoid the use of air conditioning. In some years, these tiny trees will provide good shade, we hope. And the good thing is that it's already working as a school.
So to finalize our presentation, we will briefly talk about the new lives of this pavilion we made at Zócalo. It's an ongoing project. So originally this pavilion was made for the International Culture Fair. And when it happened, it was just after the earthquake of 2017. And since this was an important public investment, we thought it was important that every part of this structure could, after the fair, be donated elsewhere. So all the logic behind the design and the construction was so that every piece of the project could be moved towards other areas of the country that needed roof, a type of roof for refugees or whatever kind of community events. These are 20 by 20 meters structures that we designed together with LabG and Eric Valdez, that is our partner also at Colectivo C733. And we've been working with a non-governmental organization called Piensa Sostenible to reestablish some of these structures in different places of the country. So this is the logic of the movement of each canopy. Each canopy can fit into one truck, and it can be mounted in one day by a crane and a small group of people. So this was the first one we re-established and moved in the south of the city in Tláhuac, where it's already working as a cultural venue. This project was made by MMX with LabG and Herendira Tranquilino. They turned one of these canopies into a kiosk, also in a public square in Nayarit, but they changed the skin and the mesh from mesh to palm tree. And then right now with Colectivo C733 have been working on new versions of this structure that we are adapting to the climates and to the conditions of different types of the country. So here it's a town in Nayarit, a city, San Blas, that also uses a lot of brick. So these are like screens of brick. And this one, the final one for us, it's a meaningful one, because here this one is a totally new structure. This one is not donated. However, we thought it would be interesting to take that logic of a structural, very light cover to this square. And the important thing about this project is not just the canopy itself, but that it's surrounded by a group of wetlands that also clean the water of the sewer that floods and goes across the square to the lake after a cleaning process. But for us, this is very meaningful because beforehand, the square had a kiosk that they used to call like historical, neo-historical kiosk, because it had the looks of the historical kiosks. But we talked to the people of the government and said, this has to be more like an ecological example, not a neo-historical example. Like many towns in Mexico, they try to reestablish that look that used to have in the colony, but we need to change the paradigm of that way of thinking. So overall, and to finalize this presentation, we're gonna give you a sneak peek of our installation for the Architectural League of New York. That is a video where we explore the acoustic quality of materials, and we explore the life of materials before they turn into buildings. We are very interested in that, in all that happens in the process of construction before it is actually made, and that we can keep in our memories through sound.
And it's a piece made by Diego Espinosa with us, and collaboration with David Sefami also.
Thank you very much.
Very beautiful work, guys. Both of you, your studios. Just a quick reminder, if anybody in the audience wants to write questions, in between the participants sign and the chat signs, there is a Q&A, question and answer sign. Please write down your questions. Meanwhile, we'll have a nice down-to-earth conversation. I wrote down some questions to start up this, and maybe we can break them down into a more relaxed conversation. First of all, I think it's very important for the audience to hear what was your experience during trying to ground this context? I mean, there is this thing about submitting your work to a manifiesto, in this case, grounding, and then the creative effort to bring this into an exhibition. They are both actually quite different. And I think to reflect on that would be really nice, even though both of you guys showed us a little bit of your exhibitions. So I don't know who would want to start, perhaps department, To.
Well, actually, for starters, when we saw the term of grounding and we were like, okay, what this is about? Because we hadn't thought about our work in terms of grounding. However, when we read about it and we read that it had to do with how we reconnect with the earth, how we connect as humans with our ground, of course, we started to realize it was a very important question. So we actually think it's a great curatorial theme nowadays, how we reconnect with our ground, with our earth, right? So that's where I think there's a kind of bridge between the two offices, because we're trying to, of course, to recycle and redefine the already modified ground we have in Mexico City, because Mexico City, it's already largely built, right? And I believe some of the projects that the department showed, even though they are in very important urban areas, they also have more like open space, and you guys are actually working with soil and testing and ground and moving it from one place to the other to give fertility to other places, which is also interesting. So I don't know if you guys had already asked yourself that question about whether your work has grounding as a main theme.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think when we saw the theme, we were very excited by it. I think it wasn't so much for us kind of repositioning our work to meet the theme of grounding, but being really excited by just seeing that was a subject matter that the League was interested in. So we kind of jumped at the opportunity to kind of show how our work has, as we said before, is quite literally involved in the ground. And I think we just ran with the kind of literal interpretation, because all of our work is situated in landscape and urban design, and the materiality and the medium that we work with is literally underfoot. So I think that, but I do think that the bridge across the two practices comes through some sort of reflection or understanding or desire to express materiality, express how things are connected to a certain place or connected to a particular history. I was really compelled by the projects that you were just presenting, Jose and Carlos, about kind of especially the palimpsest in this discussion about how a place evolves over time, or how you bring a kind of history into a project, and how you make a history legible and connect it to the past while also projecting into the future. So I really see that as a kind of connection point between the two practices.
And just to build on that, I mean, something that you just mentioned, Jose, that kind of resonates is that, like, even if you're working in a city like Mexico City, of course, there's such a legacy of alteration. And what is the ground is, it's also like, what time is the ground? Like how are you looking at this in the 15th century or in the 21st century? But even in greenfield sites, right, there's like upstream and downstream effects on maybe within your project scope, where the ground is altered by other grounds, right? So even something that may seem untouched and unblemished ground is, I think, is something that we are maybe critical of, right? And so thinking beyond the sort of preservation lens and how, and I guess like looking back and looking at the alternative forces that have shifted the ground, whether physically or not physically, is, I think, something that resonates across your work and ours.
Totally. I don't know what you see from outside, Luis.
Well, I think the response was a bit obvious in that sense, because both of your studios actually pay a lot of attention to existence. That's really nice. But then I would like to play the devil's advocate and I would ask the contrary question, because when we started designing the idea of grounding, of course, we thought that it was the opposite of this chimera. I like to say it's a chimera because we don't know in which direction it will go, of languages. There are also ungrounded solutions, and this might be another option. It actually makes me think, you know, in these discussions they used to have in the illustration in between Ruskin that only wanted to work with stone, you know, and these architects that were obsessed in trying new techniques with steel. I want to hear your opinion about ungrounded solutions.
Well, first of all, I would like to, well, congratulations, Maggie and Isaac. I love your work. And I think that topic is fascinating, Luis, because I was about to asking about actually how this concept of grounding, talking about like belonging to a place, it's related with the idea of the contributions of the migrants, for instance, or with the ideas of an exterior mind who applies the solutions in a different way. So, well, for us, for example, when we made a project, a contest for the MoMA PS1 in New York, and in other case in Milan, also a contest, and well, in different parts. That was like a non. I mean, we were not very comfortable because we didn't knew the place, and I mean, we struggled to understand the ways of doing things there. So I think it's a very interesting link between how can you relate like all the ideas that can complement from a different mind. Like in this case, I return to the theme of the migrants, for instance.
Yeah, I think something that resonates with me is this notion of what can be grounded and what is ungrounded, and the kind of relationship between the two, and the way that we interpret it in our presentation and in our submission also was thinking about how some of these ideas, while rooted in particular histories, sites, contexts, are can be translated in some way through our practice and through the methods that we develop to address different places. And so, not to say that the context of Houston is similar to the context of North Florida, is similar to the context of Mexico City, right? Like, I think that we admit that these contexts are radically different, and that through our creative practice, we develop an approach or a way of kind of coming into a new place and trying to understand how to connect to it. Just as you were saying, Carlos, like how do you come into an uncomfortable situation or place that you're not familiar with and approach that in a sensitive way. And so I was really compelled by some of the drawings that you showed that the guitar students were putting together in a similar fashion. Like it's not that we have been deeply connected to in terms of, you know, being part of the community of the sites that we've worked in, but at the same time, there's a way to kind of maybe start asking the questions that will help you to formulate some sort of design response or to ask the right questions.
And I guess like on the, maybe as like we are, you know, we do play with dirt a lot, and we're very soil based people. So from the unground, I think sometimes by pros, your pros there is that by really grounding yourself in maybe not status quo methods and things that people are looking at, maybe you're ungrounding yourself from the like political structures that are typically at play. Like for instance, with the Stormwater Park, we looked at a 19th century survey from archival research. And then when we went to get the permit to make a half-acre community-based non-for-profit stormwater park, we had to get, you know, class 2 permits that would be regulated by the top of the state that they would also put on large-scale developments. So it's like by actually looking at the ground, you start to maybe peel away and unground some of these broader, I guess, abstract forms of ground.
Yeah, and I think in that way, as an architect, you need to unground yourself to certain things, right? Like it all depends on what do you want to grab yourself or hold on to, and make that fight, right? Even with I believe that the final project we showed that it's the structure that can migrate in a way, and it's sort of ungrounding. How can such a big thing fit in a plot or in different places? It's a little bit ungrounding to that place. So even in that case, we've been making a strong effort to modify it or to rethink it. But there's always a mixture. I think you're right, but you need to establish the question.
Maybe what you were saying, Isaac, would also apply to the Motown project you guys did. There is some sort of a ungrounded typical solution to how to look at lawn in that part of America, no? Then I guess we can go to another subject. I think it's around the work you guys are working with, and it's about art and beauty. Something that also caught my attention is the fact that both of your studios understand very well the power of art as a communicating tool. But not only this, while you were doing your lectures, I also wrote, it's not only the art that you're using, but and we don't like to speak about this. Architects are repelled to speak about beauty. I don't know exactly why. But there is inherent beauty in what you guys are doing. So what would you say about this?
So
Well,
I think unmuted me. I don't know.
You wrote a note. I thought you were ready for a comment.
Go ahead first, Jose. I'll respond.
Okay, I think it actually links to one of the questions that I can read in the questions and answers chat, because Lean asks, I know that it can be difficult to integrate your own passion and creative ideas with functionality. So how did you tackle the functional limitations while maintaining your creative liberty and vision? So, I mean, I think it's inevitable. I know what you mean, Luis, that sometimes in the academic context, particularly, people or maybe it's teachers, students, I don't know where, like you don't talk about the architecture as art, or you don't talk much about the beauty of things. Whereas if you step out, I think that sphere, people does understand architecture as adding beauty to a functional building, right? I mean, it's been always a debate. And for us, I think right now that debate needs to move on because, of course, functionality has to be there and it has to be the first thing. Actually, most of our time and effort in our studio is directed to make sure that the work we deliver works, so it functions, that it doesn't get water inside. And a lot of what we do, it's necessarily just working on the functional. But I think the question beyond that, and probably I will refer to the Venice Biennial of the 2018, where the theme was the free space, is what you do with everything else. Because of course, there will always be the chance to do something beyond functionality, always. So it's not beauty what we want, it's to solve important questions or to work towards like important things that are problems laying down there. Just we have to forget about beauty and start looking at the ugly, at the problem, and address the problem. And I think that's where the question should be.
I think that you're totally right that it's a controversial question to talk about beauty, or controversial topic to address beauty. I think we maybe face it in I can think of two ways in which we encounter this question in our work. I think one is that beauty is very subjective and totally different in different contexts to different people. So I think that the cautionary tale or the difficulty with it is to assume that you understand what might be beautiful to you is very different to somebody else, or to assume a kind of universal understanding of what beauty is. So in that way, I think we encounter that in sort of shifting. I think we shift in our work, we try to shift cultural perceptions around what something that meets a certain function or addresses a problem in a new way, that can look different than the way that you might assume it might look, right? So with the lawn, for example, a lot of people think that the perfectly maintained lawn is a symbol of beauty and sort of American values. But once we start to talk about the performance of the lawn in terms of groundwater infiltration, soil health, the kind of impacts of maintaining the lawn on the health of those who are maintaining it, you start to see the problem in a different way. And then you start to propose, where we come in is we start to propose a kind of different visual or different kind of alternative that might start to shift cultural perceptions around what beauty really is and what the value of it is.
And then maybe just to like add on that specific project is like, there's also a nuance of finding the middle ground between performance and beauty, right? Like if you have a prim grass, that's generally assumed to be more beautiful from the general public, but having weeds and grasses 4 feet, 5 feet high of hundreds and 200s of species is quite messy and ugly, but that might be the most performative and the former might be the least performative. But so sometimes you have to, as the designer, find the middle ground of maybe reducing species counts, or, you know, it's like you always have to learn to crawl before you can walk, right? And so how can we start to begin this process to a more performative, more dealing with what's bad, as Jose mentioned, instead of kind of going too far and then it not being revered and maintained by the general public and valued.
Yeah, I think that's another thing that we encounter, is that when things look different than people expect them to look, or that people are used to seeing, then it can be very jarring. And so I think there's an element of towing that line or balancing the kind of visual effect and the kind of performance or the way that it's addressing a problem, so that there is buy-in and there is consensus or sort of support for the longevity of these projects. It's something that we definitely encountered in our stormwater park, that nobody wanted a giant hole filled with water right next door. But once we started to have conversations with people, started to articulate the function of the place, then we started to get a little bit more buy-in about how the park was performing. And that led to more sort of community-based maintenance events, right? Where people would come and help weed or help mow, or, you know, do other sorts of activities on the site. So that I think in some way, the question of beauty and aesthetics plays a role in kind of stewardship and a sense of ownership.
And I think this dialogue extends into like assessments of risk, or how do we reuse materials from one project site to another as well.
And yeah, I would like to add that I am totally disagree with you, guys. No, that I'm just kidding. But I do believe that it's like all things we do, like in a creative way, like architecture and other arts are art actually, and it's the most human of our behaviors, I can say. Like it's like the pursuing of the unknowing, I think, and it's more like not even like a communication tool. I think it's more like a result of a curiosity and a pursuing of knowledge, and it's I see like it's like an effect of that pursuing. So I think that yeah, it's always a controversy, and because of that subjective quality Maggie was talking about. But for sure, I think in the things we make in space and landscape and with all the social and economical and political yeah, like themes involved, and trying to answering the question of Lynn, I think that sometimes when we feel insecure about a decision, we try to grasp like a very like a secure way to I don't know how to say, but like to flee from the, how do you say, capricho? Well, like
Good question.
Yeah, when you're trying like to do something that it's like very, that nobody is gonna say, oh no, putting that tree is a wrong decision, because it's a tree and everyone likes a tree. And I mean, this is a stupid example, but when you put like every step in a logical way and trying to, okay, this will be a fresh space, and the atmosphere will be calm, and the sounds will be nice, and I mean, when you took these themes, the concept of beauty, it's not like the main goal, but it's like floating in the decision. I mean, and that subjective part, it disappears, because I mean, it's always better to try to seeking like the, how do you say, consenso of the parts. Yeah. With taking out that subjective things, like trying to defend your project with not a capricho, but with a logical statement.
Guys, I think we went, my questions were really deep. So, which I had more questions for you guys, but there are some questions from the audience. Here we have, where did come all this fascination about the relationship between materiality and its sound? What kind of question have you found it in them, and how has it impacted in your design process? Thank you, love your work. This is a question for To, evidently.
Well, thank you so much. First, I think that it's in a way like inherent in the process, and we like to think that architecture is not related just like with an image, but with all the senses. And for us, like the sound component of architecture, it's always very present, but it's that kind of layer that it's little bit less like in front, but it is always present. And that's the reason why if you see a picture, you're not like leaving the space. And we found that it's a profound component of the atmosphere in architecture. And that's the reason we make this like sound construction. It's like a play of words, but we wanted to show that it is a similar process, like when you are designing a building or a song. It is like the decisions and the selections and the balance, and it's like always a very similar process. That's the reason we really think that it's a way of knowledge, of a language, like art.
Yeah. In a way, sound reconnects you with the material, because I think we nowadays are very used to see images and slide through images all the time. But when you go into sound in a profound way, you reestablish your connection with that material. And of course, the process of production of architecture involves a lot of rhythmical sounds. That's why we invited Diego, and it has rhythm, it has movement, it's a dance, you need dance to build. So how do you document that in a different way? So I don't know, we also love music, and I think it's we always talk about the parallelisms between making architecture or making music, and we all the time are like, we should be making music. But I think every time we find a chance to link the both, we do it. We just, this is the right way.
Nice. Well, I'll go to my other question. There is also this thing about the two studios that I named action and teamwork. It seems like taking action is a major part of your conceptual process. In the case of To, you even defined yourselves as a design and building-based workshop, even if it's about constructing sounds. And in the case of department, I mean, you made the Remnant Nursery part of the exhibit, but you don't know exactly what's the exhibit. It all seems that it's about collaborative work and interactive work. I have the impression that it is something evidently related to landscape as a profession, but I think you guys take it a bit further, even when you do the Pine in the Stand exhibit. So what is there to talk about action and teamwork?
Well, maybe just you brought a thought on the Pine in the Sand, which I think maybe builds off a little bit of Jose and Carlos talking about the auditory and the music and the sound of architecture. And I think something that we always try to bring in our projects is how can we engage people further than at a moment or at one time? How can they return to a space and look at it through different times and actually rest and reflect on the space? And so by engaging people, I think we find that's one of the best means to have someone continue to engage in the park, right? Whether it's with a rake or whether it's with taking the plant home and caring for it and seeing it grow over 3 years or 5 years. And so for us, like by bringing people to the space, rolling around it, like transversing through the space and engaging with the space as much as possible is so not only action and actually doing work, but actually when people come to our designs, we want them to actually have some action and engage as well.
I think it's inherent in the way, in the material and medium that we work in as well, that it's not a static, and also with architecture, right? It's not a static object. It's not something that you just complete and you walk away. I think very much it's embedded in our process and in our work to think about the kind of legacy or the long life of how a place will evolve over time. And so I think we are as we said, I'm just allergic to all these different things. Allergic to utopian visions, but I think we also don't love to have something that seems really polished and finished, right? Because it is inaccurate to the way that a space, or specifically a landscape, will actually exist. And so with Pine in the Sand, and also with the Prairie Plots project, it's about engaging people in both the beginning of the project, and in many ways when landscape projects kick off or break ground or have their ribbons cut or whatever, they look the worst on day one, unless you have an enormous budget, right? But day one is the worst day. It's year 2, year 3, where you start to see establishment and you start to really see the landscape grow into its form. So I think that we want to be able to represent that process and that timeline.
And I think like even on more standard projects, like with developers or institutions, like we push the procurement process and the sourcing of trees and the vegetation as early as possible. So in the DD phase, and then we push the maintenance and guidance phase 3, 5, 10 years down the line for construction completion date, right? So this process and this level of engagement that we're striving for is ongoing, maybe with us, maybe with maintenance contractors, maybe with the local economy. And so understanding that it's a public space is cultivated by the public, right? And so how can we get them to engage and continually to refine it and make it more their own?
Yeah, for me, that question is very important. And I think the point of the teamwork and the collaborative effort in architecture is, it's probably the only way I see to actually transform things in a larger scale, because I think we are kind of used to work in teams or small teams or individually in separate spheres of work. But through the work we have done with Colectivos de 733 and particularly with different governments and different parts of the team, you realize, well, of course, collaboration is needed, but I believe teamwork has to do with, we'll have the same goals in the end. So why splitting them, or why competing sometimes? Like in many occasions, we have been invited to compete, and we say, why don't we gather forces and we do these things together? Of course, it's difficult in a way, but on the other, you can achieve more things in a collaborative effort. I think we need to carry on doing that very much and push towards that. Release the I don't know, the importance of the figure and spread it into the cause.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's always better and less boring to open the dialogue for the plurality, and always the ideas improves, and I don't know, catalyzes the new ways of thinking, and it is actually necessary for the sense of belonging, or for one project to prevail. I don't know, it's like architecture is not an individual work. Like I think that was like one of the most important fails of the modernity way of thinking, that you are like this genius of the architecture and you will show how the work should be. That it's like we are like seeing that kind of thinking errors in the actual crisis nowadays. So it is always better to open the dialogue, I think.
Thank you, guys. We'll go to another question. This one is for Tom, specifically the music school. Have you observed any unexpected uses or outcomes by or among the community in which it was built? Do you feel it's changed the community's perception of their own familiar neighborhood ground?
I think Matthew, we have a friend that goes to the school every day and he's here in the audience. Hello, Matthew, and hello, Mark. Yes, actually, after the opening day, the building actually is not finished. So we've been in the process of little by little finishing it. We're going to make a workshop with the community for planting the vegetation, and we're going to take a landscape designer to make like a community event for the planting the plants. But actually, the day after it was opened, some guys just jumped on the kiosk and started to have fun, apparently, and jumping and having fun, because it was like totally open, right? And it didn't have doors yet. So yeah, I believe it has an amazing view. So of course, everyone who's around would like to walk inside and be there, and it could actually work as a kiosk. The thing is that it also has a music school or a music classroom downstairs. So I think it's a very interesting phenomena. And of course it can be layered, it can be filtered, but I think that's something that can be solved in time and after listening to the observations of Matthew and the users, the inhabitants. I don't know, Carlos, if.
Yeah, well, it was really funny that in the construction process, everyone said, "Oh, it's the church is like really nice. Congratulations!" Because
yeah, they call it the church.
Yeah, but then they are like making these like events, every kind of events, not just the musical ones, but plays, and that was like the main objective of the building, to be a public kiosk for every activity, like echar novio, like a gathering, and I don't know, it's open for everything. But yeah, I think it is like a free space, so anything can happen.
We don't have any more questions. We have here a commentary. Maybe the guys from department could wrap up this chat. And here it says, what about the community response to the Good Neighborhood Stormwater Park?
Yeah, so when we did the Good Neighbor Stormwater Park, we worked with a community engagement specialist at Van Allen Institute, as well as many local residents and the local artists and the local architect. And so there was a lot of buy-in just during the whole process of actually establishing and building the park. And even just because it was such a small budget, it was basically like a design build where we actually were on the park and installing and designing it. And I think that might have been some of the most
fruitful sort of engagement
with the specific neighbors, right? Because it's in the middle of a suburban 1 acre, half acre, quarter acre lots. And so the immediate adjacencies were really important to get buy-in from the city at large.
I think that it was, again, like I mentioned previously, like there is some challenge to introducing this kind of new type of infrastructure or this pond in a neighborhood that people are not expecting a giant stormwater retention pond to be in. So I think that it wasn't so much pushback as it was just curiosity or just wanting to know what the park was doing. And so I think the week after the park opened, there was a record rainstorm that totally flooded the area, and people were thinking that the pond was actually, the retention basin was flooding the adjacent neighbors when actually it was holding the water from and preventing worse flooding. And so it was really, it's
so the
really
mayor
about,
actually emailed us. The mayor emailed us and was like, your new park is pouring water out onto the neighborhood. And then, the engineer was CC'd in it. So he came to our savior and said, water actually goes down. So the water was collecting in the pond.
but I think that it highlights a kind of sensitivity and the the sensitivity that you have to have in doing projects like this, and also just the kind of public awareness and how much like education, awareness, community engagement, outreach, and also just like being able to make sure that it's clear or just the legibility of the project it comes across, I think, or building legibility into the project, I think is really important for us so that these dynamics are
But I mean, to date, the neighborhood has really taken on a lot of the responsibility, which I think the city is grateful for, of like picking up the trash and maintaining it, because it's basically an extension of their backyards. And even like some people have been planting plants there. It's kind of like an ongoing, ever growing, evolving space.
Thank you very much, guys. Well, we don't have any more questions and we have to wrap up. So Anne has popped in. Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much. It was just a fascinating presentation. And I think that the level of community involvement in all the projects and the implications for a kind of hands-on approach to really helping people understand the making and sound and texture and climate of place was evident crossing both your projects. I'd like to invite everyone to come back next week for something completely different with Farzan Latlijam of Farzan and Safi Laida Aguirre of Staka Studio. Same time, same place. And we hope that if you haven't looked at the installations that I've mentioned, you get a chance to visit those. The interviews with each of the winners are rolling out weekly, so stay tuned for those. And thank you very much for joining us.